This podcast is made possible by VersaPay.
Hello, this is Chris Greiner here with Zeta Global, and you're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 878.
We don't leave it to the manager to order what they want. We know what's turning, we know what's not turning, and we know in each store what's happening. So I think it goes deeper than a financial metric. It goes into the data that's coming in from our stores that a lot of retailers are looking at. Is what I have on the shelf the right shelf? Do I have too much inventory, not enough inventory? Because being out of stock is just as bad as having too much stock. It's a lost sales opportunity. So we really have focused hard on computer assisted ordering and making sure we're in stock, because those are missed sales. And then we're also focusing on what needs to be in the store, and also what are our loyal customers doing? And because we can measure their market baskets, we can see what they're doing, and we can see what the attachment rates are to different products we sell.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Don Bassell, CFO of ARKO Corp, a Fortune 500 company and one of the largest operators of convenience stores and wholesalers of fuel within the United States today. As we interview CFOs from different industries, certain finance leaders have told us that they bracketed the CFO office as their preferred career destination from day one of their professional lives. Still, others have told us that it was only due to the intervention of a determined mentor that they resolved to aim ever higher and ultimately arrived in the C-suite. Neither of these profiles depict the experience of Don Bassell, CFO of ARKO Corp. Bassell tells us he had nearly 2 decades of career-building years behind him before he began thinking of himself as a future CFO. There was no looking back for Don Bassell. His next career stop was the CFO office. That story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. When your accounts receivable automation focuses only on back office tasks, you forget the most important stakeholder, your customers. VersaPay gives you all the tools you need to automate those tasks, plus the collaboration tools to take on everything that automation alone simply can't. This doesn't just increase efficiencies and accelerate cash flow, but also creates a dramatically improved experience for your customers. And as the economy tightens, can you really afford to risk losing customers over an invoice to cash process they find frustrating? With VersaPay, clients typically achieve 50% less time managing receivables, 25% faster payments, 30% fewer past due invoices, and 81% customer portal adoption. Learn more about VersaPay's collaborative AR, ERP payments, and cash application solutions at versapay.com/CFO. Hello, we're speaking with Don Bassell, CFO of ARKO Corp and its subsidiary, GPM Investments. Don, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Glad to be here.
So, Don, we always begin by asking our guests to look back for us. And what we're looking for are those experiences you feel best prepared you for a finance leadership role along the way. As you look back, what comes to mind?
I think all of it. I mean, when I came out of school, everybody said you're going to go work for Big 8 public accounting. I mean, that was your mission. That's what you did. Worked for them, what was Pete Mark, now KPMG in Raleigh, North Carolina. And thought, wow, great. I have my career all started. Got into auditing and said, I don't want to be an auditor. I mean, I clearly found I don't want to be an auditor. So I came out of that, and then got involved just by chance, applied to an ad, got involved with a company called Tenneco Oil Company, which was a sort of a mix between a major oil company and a convenience store company. They had food shops and they also had refineries and things like that. And I loved it. I mean, it just connected because it was really, really, I mean, I was dealing with the people. It was real. I could see it. It was convenience stores. I could see the transactions happening. So that really got me engaged. It was more than just, I don't want to sit in a back room and just create something. And in fact, later in my career, as I worked for major oil companies, I got involved in some of those things, like in crude oil, where I had to sit back and just sit with AR and AP. And I said, it's not what I want to do. I mean, it was more of, I really like connecting with people and I like to help them from the financial side and also the business side, putting those two together. That was always very, very important to me.
The convenience store, when did you step into that? Was that just right after your KPMG experience, or?
No. Actually, what happened is I was, quite frankly, I finished up at KPMG, then went to work for a small photo finishing company as a financial analyst because I wanted to stay around the Durham area where I went to school, and didn't like that. So I was 2 years out of school, kind of disillusioned, saying, I studied accounting all this time. What am I doing? And so I think going in and meeting with people at Tenneco, and what really engaged me was that interaction. I mean, one of my first jobs at Tenneco was I was the accountant for a market in Louisiana. So I had like 40 stores that I was responsible for. And I mean, I had supervisors that would call into me. I mean, I did all the accounting literally by hand. We had a big, data entry room that keyed in all their invoices. But when it came to the end of the month, I mean, all the retail accounting was done by me. I mean, all the fuel accounting. So I had, 5 supervisors that were calling me. I was their person. I was their financial person. And it really, really got me engaged. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I found really thrilling was before they let me start, they put me 2 weeks into a store. So I had to work in a store for 2 weeks and understand how to front and face, the cooler, how to stock shelves, how to run a cashier, how to take cash out at the island, because this was before credit cards were accepted at the pump. So, I mean, you really, really had to understand the business. So I think my orientation was one of, wow, this is what I love. I'm working with people. I love the accounting piece of it. Got it. That makes sense. But I'm also using all that to help the people I enjoy working with and really help explain their results, their P&L, digging into things. So I think it was the personal side and the accounting side coming together that really made just really click for me a lot.
And that was very early in your career. It sounds like if you hadn't had that moment of insight where you're like, wow, I'm enjoying this. I like seeing how the business operates up close, that you might have decided accounting wasn't for you. I just think there are a lot of accounting professionals who never do get to the shop floor or to the front cash register.
Yeah, I will tell you, I can't tell you how true that is. I mean, almost in every business I've been in and every operation I've been involved with ever, being close to people. At one time, they gave me an assignment to go work at the refinery. My new fiance, we just had to move to Beaumont, Texas, which nothing against Beaumont, but probably not the sweet spot of the earth. And she's moved from Phoenix, Arizona, and we're moving now to Beaumont, Texas, which is a great town, but it's refineries and chemical plants. And it was just thrilling to me. I mean, I got to drive in the plant, and one of the jobs I had, I was in charge of volume accounting. So I would meet with the chemical engineers, see what the slate was for that day. And, I didn't even understand that they cracked hydrocarbons. I learned it in chemistry, but we would sit down and they'd tell me what the slate was. And I mean, I'd go down and I'd sit down, go all the way to the dock where the crude oil was being brought in, go around to all the reactors and see what was happening. And I don't want to say it was a blast. That's the wrong word. But it was so much fun because I got involved in the business. The same way over my career, and most of it's been in convenience retail, I've always looked for opportunities where I have an influence in the business, not just someone that's what I'll call the bean counter or just keep score. So that's been really, really important to me. And I think that been a foundation as I worked towards becoming a CFO. Quite frankly, I never held the role of a controller. I held accounting manager, accounting supervisor, did FP&A work, even did some IT, MIS work and things like that. But being a controller was something I never really, really wanted to do because I didn't want to just sit in a room and create journal entries all day long. Although I loved getting my journal entries in. I loved getting everything balanced. That gave me a lot of satisfaction. And I think that, as I progressed in my career, it was always great. Again, the first couple roles were making sure, closing the books, making sure everything's done, making sure things were reconciled, but also making sure that the people who this information was going to understood what was behind that. And that's the part that really made a lot of sense. And don't get me wrong, I'm a CPA and I'm very big on issues, on technical issues, and I have lots of people that I work with on that. That's also important, especially for a public company. But that's where you hire the right people to get it. And I think that early beginning and having that interaction with the business itself was very, very important to me, and really, really sort of shaped my career going forward.
Has it been retail ever since, or was there one chapter where you stepped out of that, the retail industry?
Yeah. So I did step out of the retail industry. I mean, like I said, I did do a stint down in refining. I did do a little bit with natural gas liquids. I didn't know liquids could come out of natural gas, but they do. But I did in between. I worked for Amoco and Mobile after Tenneco, and I did go to a large dispenser manufacturer called Gilbarco. And Gilbarco at that time, they're a major producer of dispensers in this country. They had point of sale cash registers. They had the dispensers, but they didn't have the back office software. Like just an ERP for a company, and especially in the convenience store industry, it's really important because you have multiple locations. They're have to do their paperwork every day so it can get centralized. Reporting, scanning data coming in, scanning items coming in. So it's a really key element of the whole process. And so I went from working in a financial, maybe some IT world, to now I had a consulting group reporting to me. I had support reporting to me, and I also went on sales calls. So that was a huge change. And I had a group in California. I had a group in Montreal. I also had a small group in Thailand. So that was a huge change for me. And what it really showed me is, with in retail convenience stores, it's a cash business. And even though customers come in, yes, it can be destination. Your credit cards are getting paid within 2 to 3 days. You're getting cash, so you're not really worried about collections. You're not really worried about, okay, how am I get this sale done? Although you are concerned about making sure you get the best, what the customer wants. I mean, we actually had to go out and sell stuff. I mean, and that was new to me, and I had to be part of that process. And quite frankly, I understand and said, yes, salespeople should be one of the highest compensated people in the company, because unless they close a deal, there's nothing for anybody else to do. So it was a lot of fun to do that. I learned a lot, especially when I was on the other side. So like when we went to the conventions and industry conventions, the NACS convention, which is for convenience stores, probably one of the largest conventions, industry conventions in the country. And so typically I was a guest. Now all of a sudden I had to be a presenter, and I had to stand on my feet all day and have to answer questions. And I would get questions from a lot of customers coming in. I had to go to a lot of meetings and talk about issues and solve problems. So it was a little bit on a different role. But one of the reasons they recruited me to go do that is they wanted somebody from industry. So it was a really, really good experience to sort of like take that break mid-career and learn what's involved in dealing with customers and really how do you sell something. I think it was a huge impact to me to be able to do that.
Were you chosen for that, do you think, as well, because you had, it was obvious your interpersonal skills were someone who could build relationships? I mean, were you already identified as someone who is a relationship builder and a good representative when they send them out?
Yeah. I think it was, and the company reached out.
Sometimes you're sent out to grow. Like, this will be a good experience, and I'm not saying it wasn't that, but sometimes they take the quiet guy and try to socialize him. I think just given the fact that you were always sort of out front with the business and socializing with salespeople and what have you, you were generally known as someone who could perform in that environment.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a funny story to tell you on that. But some of the people who went to form that business because they didn't have it knew me and said, "This is the person I want to bring in." And when they called me, I said, "All right, sounds like a good opportunity." If you remember in the late '90s, the recessions were hitting and stuff like that. So I said, "Why not? Good opportunity. Let me go do that." Looking to get away from some of this, make a change from what I was doing. I'll never forget when I was with Amoco and I was running a sort of an FP&A group and doing some other things too. But we had about 450 company operated stores, and there was a group up in Philadelphia, and they requested they needed me for a meeting. So I came up with my suit, my briefcase, everything like that. And I sat down and they looked at me and said, relax. I said, what do you mean relax? I said, we just brought you up here to get you out of the office and have a fun time. So that was a lot.
Yeah.
That really was. And, the other thing, too, I got involved when AMCO was launching their own new, modern convenience store, which offered a lot of food, big convenience store, which in the early 90s was not that common. It really wasn't. I joined with the team to work with marketing to help develop this concept and help a lot on the measurements, like looking at ideal food costs and, things like that. I mean, when I first got there, their cost of sales was based on what they thought they should be making. And, we joke about it now, but, making sure we get the systems in place and looking and saying, okay, how do we measure food costs? How do we do that? And it was a lot of fun. It really was, because I was working with those people to help develop a new concept that would eventually get franchised out. So it was breaking away from the accounting piece and working with marketing and helping develop something specific for the company. So experiences like that were really, really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed them.
Were your titles on the way up, going back in time? Again, it sounds like sometimes your roles were defined in real time. Just the example you just gave, for instance, sounds like that's maybe an FP&A professional, or you clarify it for me, who would have been deployed from the finance department into that sort of specialized area. And I guess what I'm getting at is maybe you've had a lot of somewhat unconventional titles along the way as well, because you didn't fit into the traditional finance structure.
Well, I've had a lot of conventional titles too. I mean, for example, I've been, I was a treasury manager. I was accounting supervisor many times, an accounting manager. But then what happened during these periods is I got pulled into other opportunities to do things. I mean, I can tell you one of the things that a position I moved into that I really caused me to go to something else is the company I was working with was putting in SAP, and they said, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to go put in SAP. And I just said, nah, this is not what I want to be doing, because I'm sitting dealing with a lot of techies and not dealing with people out there making money. But I have had a lot of traditional accounting roles. I really have. With Tenneco, also with Amoco, even though what was interesting and something that I would tell people is I was interviewed by Amoco to be the controller to the job, and I didn't get the job. And so the recruiter told me, write them a nice letter back and tell them, you're interested. 2 weeks later, they called me back and said, well, you know what? Guess what? We don't want you to be here, but how would you like to be manager of financial reporting? I said, great, I'll come on in. So that was really something that was really important to me. I'll also tell you, opportunities came via my wife too, because we were sitting in Beaumont, Texas at the time, working for Mobil, and I was in a refinery, and I was happy, and I don't know how happy she was, but apparently not that happy. So I got a call from a recruiter to go to Amoco, and I said, no, I'm happy, I'm good. So the recruiter called my wife and said, well, we've got an opportunity, for your husband to just want to check and see if he wants to go. And she says, is it outside of Beaumont? And he said, yes, he'll be on the plane. So, I owe her a lot of credit for sort of pushing me in those directions too. But again, one of the things that required too is I moved a lot. I mean, about every 18 months, I'd have to move to a new opportunity. And that's what happened a lot when you worked, especially within major companies. And I think that was really one big advantage. I mean, for example, I moved, I was treasury manager in Orlando office for Tenneco, and they wanted me to be the accounting supervisor up there. And one of the things that was a lot of fun is, I went into this environment and it was great. And I was in Nashville. I didn't know much about Nashville, had a blast. Really enjoyed the group I worked with and charged them up. And they were kind of, so things like, working with them to get the quality of the reconciliations, the quality of everything done. But that was important to me is again, strong, background in doing all that. In fact, when I first interviewed with GPM, because I've been here twice in 2003, one of the questions was, are you an IT guy or are you an accounting guy? And I said, well, I'm both, because I had back and forth roles, and I've done a lot of treasury also. So it was just really important to have all these diversified roles. And I think that's helped make me successful, because when you have those different roles, When you become CFO, they all become yours. So rather than moving straight out of a typical financial role or coming out of public accounting, there's just so many things that all of a sudden become yours. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. When you first become a CFO, that kind of, it's eye opening and you don't think about.
Was there ever a fork in the road where you could continue down a traditional finance path, perhaps with the idea maybe I'll be a finance leader or advance into the ranks of CFO someday, or I could become a general manager? I mean, it seems to me that you had enough business knowledge, general business knowledge, at some point in your career where you could have become president of a division, or maybe you did, I don't know, but or a general manager of some geography. Were those opportunities ever thought about, at least?
Yeah, they were. In fact, I was interviewed for a position to run an organization that was running out of Europe and South America, which I didn't want to do just because it would involve a lot of travel. I think the fork in the road came for me when I went to work for Gilbarco, and Gilbarco eventually decided to sell the back office business. And I knew I went into this just for a temporary period because I wanted to get away from maybe some of the things that were going on and just sort of take a break. And then I really had to decide for myself, what do I want to do? What is it I really, really want to do? And I sat down with an HR consultant just to help get my resume ready. And we went through this whole process of saying, let's list the things you've done. Because like, as you say, I've had a lot of different roles. So she really walked through me and said, okay, let's go through sort of a little base of series of interviews, questionnaires to help determine what it is you really want to do. And my goal out of that, I didn't think I wanted to be a CFO. That was not in my view. And so when we got through it, we said, looks like that's really where you want to be. And the other thing was she helped me do is to put together more of a functional resume rather than a chronological to show all the different roles. So that was really a crossroad that I had to say, what is it I want to do? Because I did have these different experiences. And we finally decided in looking at everything.
Was she just executive search, or is this some?
She was a former SVP of HR for a Fortune 500 company and set up a consulting firm that would not only do your resume, but help you figure out where to do career searches and what you really wanted to do. I mean, I was in my early 40s and said, not sure I really want to go. And that was a true fork, because I'd done a lot of things.
You're highlighting something that I think is really interesting and isn't often discussed. And I think it happens frequently where very accomplished executives, don't, have to come to a conclusion, but they need someone to help pick their brains and help draw attention to certain aspects of their resume and why they're qualified to go places they never might have aimed for or had the intention of. How am I doing? Am I close? Or
you're exactly close. You're right on target. And I can tell you, there was a company in town that they told me, well, they have a CFO that's going to be retiring, and they want to bring in a controller and to take over. And I interviewed, great company, and I found out the CFO was only 2 years older than me, and that kind of concerned me. And I said, I don't know if this is what I really want to do. And I remember the final conversation I had when he made me the offer, and he said, well, don't you understand? You're going to be preparing all the materials that are going into the boardroom. And I said, but that's the problem. I want to be in the boardroom, and it became very crystal clear to me. And Jack, you're exactly right. It was a crossroads for me. I mean, where do I want my career to go? I love the financial side. I love treasury. I love working with people. I love IT. How do I put this all together? And I think sitting down with this individual, and we met several times, it wasn't a long process, but she really helped me, not just to do my resume, but to really help me assess what it is I want to do in life. And that was a crossroad for me. And I think a lot of people do go through that.
From that time of that discussion or consultation, how many years into the future did you step into a CFO role then?
I'm sorry.
Beyond that conversation,
the next step was to go out and get a CFO role. So that wasn't,
and so it happened in short order.
Right. In other words, it happened. That was the next job I took right away. So it wasn't like I'm thinking or whatever. That was the next job I took. And that was the first time I came to then GPM Investments. It came in 2004 to be a CFO of what was then a 160 store chain. So it was a nice, it was a nice chain. It was in 3 states, great people here. But it was a great way to step into that role and to do something like that. So it was a lot of fun. But by the way, a fun fact, and I'll tell you later. I worked for another convenience store chain that was formed by private equity, and they recruited me in 2010 to go there, and then I came back to GPM Investments when Ari Kotler, who was the CEO, called me. I think I'm the only CFO in the city of Richmond that's been released from 2 non-competes. So I take great pride in that. But I guess people have trust. But it's one of the things that was really important to me also is I looked. My kids were fairly young. I mean, I had a first grader and a fourth grader, and I said I can't keep moving around the country. I said, it's great when my wife and I are moving, we keep moving, but I can't keep doing this to them. I've got to get roots and settle. So I was looking for a job where I could go with a company and have a family and have them grow. And I'm so thrilled to be here, to be here now, 18 and a half years later, or now 19 years for me. It's 18 and a half for my family. They grew up here. They had a great life here. They went to school, they left to college, and it was just such a blessing to be able to do that. It really was.
Well, that's a great segue for us then to find out about GPM Investments and ARKO. And if you wouldn't mind, for those that might not be familiar with this company, and it's a fairly sizable, I believe, Fortune 500 company. And can you tell us about it? It's a little complex, the story. Tell us about this business. What does it consist of today? What are its offerings, really?
Right. It's actually pretty straightforward. I mean, GPM Investments is the operating company. ARKO Corp is the public company that essentially owns it. So what it is we're roughly about 1,400 convenience stores and roughly about 1,600 wholesale sites. And when I say a wholesale site, if you think about it, the way to define it, it's a dealer. And the way you sort of, for the listeners, and the easy way I describe it is that it's who operates the convenience store. So if we operate the convenience store, it's our site, we're running it. If a dealer is operating the convenience store, it's their site, we're selling fuel to them. That's why they're a wholesale customer. So we have this big wholesale population. We have a big convenience population. And we recently bought a fleet fueling operation, which is more like where trucks pull in, not over the road, but just like landscaping trucks, FedEx, whatever, and they can fill up quickly. It's fast fill diesel, sells mostly diesel. So we've grown. Again, when I left, I was with Max Mid Atlantic Convenience Store, which was a investment owned by L Catterton, and L Catterton was a great private equity firm to work with, and I've seen a lot. But one of the things, as a side note, is that they wrote a very big check in there. And that has pluses and minuses, which I can talk about later. But ARKO is we have grown through now 22 acquisitions, okay, over the last 8 years. So that's been a lot to do, and we operate under 18 banners across the country. So we're primarily a convenience retailer, but we've got these great engines. We've got this great wholesale engine and great fleet fueling engine that provide steady cash flow and give us opportunity. But we're the number 6 largest convenience store chain in the country, and people wouldn't know that because we operate under so many brands.
So, and let me just clarify for the listeners too, because we went through a lot of information on your career climb, a lot of great stories along the way. But you were at GPM Investments, you leave GPM, you're at GPM for quite some time, 7 years, and then you leave, and as you explained, you come back and you step into the CFO role when you arrive back in roughly 2014. Is that right?
That's
Do I have
correct.
that right?
That's correct.
And the last 8 years with all those acquisitions, as you described for us, what we'd be curious learning about is that the different milestones of that CFO tenure, that 8 years, and it must be such a very different organization from the one you arrived at in 2014. It's evolved over time, and so has your the finance function. Perhaps you've added new and different talent to it. Perhaps it's been reorganized. Can you, just from an organizational point of view, maybe can you tell us how that finance function has evolved over time?
No, that's a great question. It's a great question. So, when the gentleman who helped founded the chain initially, Ari Collar, it was a minority owner in 2003, and eventually the people in the major investors sold out, and he had to leave the business. So he had been trying to get back in for years, and there was a lot of changeover in Israel about who ownership in the company. And I was looking at it saying, this is great, but where are we going? And I had an opportunity to come. They came to me and said, hey, look, here's an opportunity we got for you. There's an equity opportunity for you. Let's go. And so that's why I went to Max. We sold way ahead of the theory and did a great job with that. And then Ari called me and said, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. So he said, well, I need you to come back. He said, we've got good people here, but Ari and I have always been very close friends and have a great trust with each other. And at that point, they had just doubled in size. So right before I joined, were roughly about 200 some odd stores, and they basically doubled in size. So that's the first real opportunity. What do you do? This is the first major acquisition. And so I came back, and actually the CFO that was in place is a great partner. He's now VP of Finance, so he's doing a great job. He works very heavily on acquisitions and a great partner for me. But what we had is I had a GPM South and a GPM North. I had controllers over both. I had, it was two different systems. It was almost like, one won't talk to the other. There was not an integration that really, even though operations had integrated, the accounting department had not integrated yet. So I knew the people that were in this office. So I went down to the people in the Wilmington office, and all I saw were arms crossed in front of me, looking at me, saying, okay, what are you going to do now? So I think the first thing we did is try and get the principals together. I'll call it like a detente, bring them all to lunch and say, okay, it's not our way, it's not your way. Let's figure out the best way. And that worked out really, really well. In fact, our corporate controller, and our VP of tax come from that organization. And a lot of people that come from that organization, from the finance side, are in that Wilmington organization. So there was a lot of good that came out of there. There were good things that happened in Richmond. There were good things that were going on in Wilmington. So what we did is said, let's find the best of both and bring them together. But that took a while because there were some hurt feelings, like who's going to be in charge of what. And it was through sitting down, bringing people together, saying, okay, tell us how you do something. How do you do this? How do you do that? And I kind of acted as the judge. I was the impartial, saying, it sounds like this is a good process. Why don't we do that? But that took me a good 6-7 months to even get that in place, to get that going. And one of the other things I learned too is, even before COVID came along, what's wrong with having two offices? There really is an issue because one of the things I found in Richmond, it is very tough to recruit accountants, CPAs. It's just a really tough town. Wilmington, it's a gorgeous place. A lot of people want to move there, and there's a lot of great talent. And I walked in that office down there. I said, "Oh my God, this office is just loaded with talent." So we moved a lot of things down there. I love those people down there. I enjoy the people up here. So there were some changes. I mean, some people left, and most of them did on their own accord. Others were, decisions we had to make. But that was a real first combination we had to make. And once we did that, we saw it work. And then as we grew, we could acquire things in different places. Like we acquired a 92 store chain in Johnson City, Tennessee, and said, hey, some really good people here. And we allowed them to work remotely. And we said, you just because they're not in an office doesn't mean you have to, you tell that talent you don't want them. And so when we go out and we don't acquire just stores, we acquire talent as well. And I think that's really been a real huge reason for our success.
When you think back to how you operated back in 2014 to what's your dashboard looks like today, it'd be interesting to learn how that might have evolved and whether You're able to see into the business much deeper, perhaps, than you were.
Absolutely, absolutely. Without question. I think one thing though that remained the same, our ERP system. We use PDI, which is the predominant software in this industry. One of the things that we did, and I think was really of any acquisition company, really, is made sure that our backbone systems were in each store, same registers, same back office, same environmental, tracking policy. So there's certain basics, that we did, and even though we have all these brands, same marketing programs, things like that. So we put the structure in, and that's really important because that's the way, quite frankly, you realize the synergies. It's how you get, you stop from trying to combine a lot of data all over the place. So that has been really important to our success. In terms of technology, I mean, it's just taken a huge leap forward. I mean, especially with BI, using a lot of BI tools to do our analysis these days, rather than having developers sit down and write programs. I mean, when I first got here, when we needed reports, I mean, it was, okay, let's see if this developer has time to do something. Where we're moving now is more enabled kind of tools, user-enabled tools to do it. Obviously, we put in products like Hyperion to give people better budgeting skills and visibility and real-time drill-down technology. We also have spent a lot of money, a lot of effort on loyalty and be able to look at market basket and seeing what people are buying. I mean, it's great to, look at sales and whatever, but a lot of work's being done more to understand the consumer and understand what's going on. One of the big things that, I think that helped us a lot is we used a workflow product for payables. So that, I mean, we had all these offices and you know how it can be. Somebody can sit back and have a bunch of invoices in their office. I mean, that was a painful thing to implement, but it's been great because all invoices now come directly into payables. When we go into our ERP system, you can drill down and see the invoice itself. You don't have to go back and do it. And every quarter, we don't have to worry about what's sitting outstanding. We just look what's sitting out there and we can accrue it. So it's things like that have really helped. I mean, we've done a lot of document scanning, getting rid of a lot of paper. So paper's not coming to us. So people can research paper. But the real move now is how do we put BI into our system so that, especially for operations and marketing, so they're not getting just inundated with data. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people is that, okay, we send you this report, we send you that report. It's hard to deal with all the reports, all the things that are going on. And the real move for us right now is to turn a lot of our tools, rather than to be reported, we've already moved some of them, but to move them to be BI-enabled tools so that user can request what they want and not have to just generate something on the fly or have a programmer go back and do it.
That type of effort to achieve the collaboration that might be required there, that's something we've been talking to finance leaders about. In other words, there are people who these days are in charge of data integrity. They are trying to help the finance team understand better. Maybe it's the customer experience. Anyway, the different people that are now at the table having a conversation with your finance team, the IT people, the data insight people, the customer experience people. Has that changed at all? Are you kind of surprised who your finance is collaborating with?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we typically, IT is part of my organization, and I've got a leader in IT who's very much about that. I've got a just recently brought in an FP&A person, and again, because of remote hiring, she lives in Kansas City, so we were able to bring her in. Tremendous effort. So it's not just IT, but it's having someone like her and her team sit down with marketing, operations, accounting to go through all the different pieces of it. Okay, and then you focus on facilities, like what's the customer experience like when they get it, what happens, and what is needed, what's the customer interface going to be like, but then on the back end, what do we need and what kind of reporting do we need and how is that going to happen? So it's not just accounting sitting down and saying, well, get this. It's everybody coming together and making sure everybody's needs are met. And I think it's not just, I think it's more than just accounting. You would say the finance function in general. Well, obviously that does include FP&A, but you've got to really partner with the operations and marketing people. Because, I think the old model of somebody says, well, I need a system to do this. IT developed that for me. That's long gone. We've really put a big emphasis. I think our biggest increase in spend for next year is going to be besides operationally will be, and G&A will be in IT, because we see that as a real, tool to help us, go forward. And one of the things we did in the IT organization is we've put a lot of project managers in there. And when I mean project manager, yes, I love PMPA and it's all great, but I don't want to have to, sit down and state my mission, my purpose and everything, but people who can really get in there, work and understand. And I joke about that a little bit because I've worked with some pretty intense PMPAs in my life. But people can get in there and work with all the stakeholders that are involved. And it's not just, again, you've seen this too. Marketing may have one concept, operations has another idea. Well, I don't think we can execute that. Well, let's bring everybody together and make sure, because it's not just an accounting issue. It's not just a marketing issue. It's not just an operations issue. It's also a facilities issue. How is equipment going to be placed? Where is it going to be? Is this going to be, is it going to be durable? How are we going to track this stuff? So there's a lot of different parties involved. And I think one of the things that we're doing, and I think very successfully, is bringing all the parties to the table and doing that planning ahead of time. And I think, we do the same thing on acquisitions as well. And I think what's made our acquisitions so successful, we do so much planning before it ever happens. So it's no different than that. It's no different than a project. But unless you include all those parties, it just doesn't work.
In light of the BI technologies and the focus you now have on really leveraging them, uh, is there a number or a metric that it surprises you how it's sort of captured your attention, whereas turn back the clock and it wasn't something you looked at very often, but there's some new measure, or maybe it's a measure you're just sharing more broadly across the organization. Maybe you always thought of it as interesting, and important to finance, but now you realize it could be more broadly shared. I don't know. I'm just trying to give you some examples.
Yeah. And one thing, and we talk about this a lot, and it's a finance metric, but it's really more of it's also an operating metric, especially as you look at the world of loyalty and you look at you look at not just consumer, but you look at consumer market basket. Market basket is a huge metric that we're looking at. What does that consumer buy when they buy this? It's really digging down deep. You can say, okay, well, my sales in this are up, my sales in this are up, my sales in this are up. What are the attachments to those different sales? I think those are the metrics, that mean more and more. Like, well, if a consumer buys this, what else are they going to spend? And this is something we've known about, but we're able to catch more data about it. It's also, if you look at like planogramming, what goes in the stores, like, what's turning, what's not turning. And we've done a lot of computer assisted ordering so that we don't leave it to the manager to order what they want. We know what's turning, we know what's not turning, and we know in each store what's happening. So I think it goes deeper than a financial metric. It goes into the data that's coming in from our stores that a lot of retailers are looking at. Is what I have on the shelf the right shelf? Do I have too much inventory, not enough inventory? Because being out of stock is just as bad as having too much stock. It's a lost sales opportunity. So we really have focused hard on computer assisted ordering and making sure we're in stock, because those are missed sales. And then we're also focusing on what needs to be in the store, and also what are our loyal customers doing. And because we can measure their market baskets, we can see what they're doing, and we can see what the attachment rates are to different products we sell. I think that gets you to the next level, especially in our environment of what's happening, because you're trying to understand consumer behavior, consumer preferences, and what do I really offer them versus here's a P&L, here's your categories, here's what's good and here's what's not good. Let's understand what's behind those things and what's driving those things.
I'm sorry we're running long. That's my fault. I've been enjoying our discussion and I kind of lost track a little bit. I want to ask you about the COVID experience, just because retail, a lot of people would wonder, that has to be quite a story as to how it arrived and how the company dealt with it. And then I want to ask the finance strategic moment. Would that be okay?
Sure. That's great.
Okay. The pandemic with you, I'm wondering how, give us a report card. How do you think you did? And what were the circumstances the company had to go through?
Oh, I think we did great during the pandemic. I really do. We had to obviously we had to, we had a test on a Tuesday, I remember, where everybody was going to, go at home and do remote tests. And from there, they said, stay home. And so we had people with desktops that we had to put, wireless cards on until we could replace them all with laptops. So that was a pretty rapid situation getting that all done. We also had to deal with a lot with shields, for the store employees, had a lot of COVID cases and things like that. So there was a lot of fear out there. I mean, there's a lot of fear. And one of the biggest issues is customers coming without masks, things like that. But we did some things early on. First of all, the convenience store is sort of like it was considered an essential business. So it was not, it could remain open. Normally we remain open during hurricanes or till the end of the hurricane and we're the first ones to open. So we took advantage of some opportunities. Like, for example, there was a perfume manufacturer in Florida, which our CEO knew, and he said, "Don't shut down. I need hand sanitizer." So we were quickly on the market with hand sanitizer all over the place, and it was a great opportunity to do that, along with other essential items. So we were able to move quickly and swiftly to change with the model. Since we weren't so heavy into food service, which obviously we're going to move forward to, we didn't get impacted as bad. More of the chains that had heavy food service were impacted a little more than we were, but we were pretty swift and pretty nimble with that. And our staffs, because we were used to working remotely and used to working over Teams and things like that, wasn't a tough thing for us to do. And we're still mostly remote today. It's hybrid. People can come in or come out. So I think the advantages we had because we could move quickly and also because we were sort of a spread out organization helped us to adapt that pretty well.
So we're up to our finance strategic moment question, where I get to ask you for one moment of strategic insight that you've had along the way. You've had 3 of these probably already today, but we're just looking for a moment of insight or inspiration or, a fork in the road sometimes, whatever it might have been. What comes to mind?
Yeah, well, there's one and then there's none. The one I remember, when I was with Amico, we did all the retail accounting for all it, and we did it in Thomasville, Georgia. And then some consulting agency said, shared service centers. That was the big thing of the 90s. So they said, guess what? Everybody's moving to Tulsa. Congratulations. So we had about 70 employees. There were only 7 of us that were going to move to Tulsa. Okay. So that was a little scary, saying whatever. And this comes to the people issue. People always talked about the right people. We had the right 7 people come with us. And we were quickly able to reestablish that organization in Tulsa within a matter of 2 months. So that said a lot to me about the importance of the key people in my organization who are working for me. Because without those key people, but those key people were able to hire and reestablish what we had pretty quickly. So that I mean, you say, yeah, talent's worth everything, but talent that can also do things on their own, that can also act, that don't need you for everything. And it was amazing to me. It was clearly amazing to me. The other strategic moment, you might laugh about this, but since I came out of big companies, I first became CFO. I said, oh my God, the cash, it's my cash. I'm responsible. If we don't have cash, there's no big company to give me cash. And we had plenty of cash, but there was no one to do, for example, insurance. There was no one to do other things like property taxes. I mean, it seems simple, but I'd worked for big companies my whole life, and there was always somebody doing something else, and you're always transferring money and whatever. And quite frankly, while I participated in audits, I never went through a full audit, on my own. So it was kind of I'm glad it was small at that time. And I say cash because you never in a big company, you don't think about that. You don't think about, and I had to, do my own lines of credit and do things like that. So it was great. It was a lot of fun, but it was kind of, oh, wow, this is what it really means. Like most companies in America work for, not the big companies, having to do everything yourself.
Hello and welcome to 60-second stories from CFO Thought Leader. One of the unspoken truths about interim CFO roles is that they sometimes don't lead to actual CFO appointments. For CFO Jared Poff, the interim title left a lasting impression. Back in 2015, Poff was appointed treasurer of retailer Designer Brands after being recruited as a prospective future CFO. However, Poff tells us that within months of joining the company's board put in motion a CEO change. Not certain that a first-time CFO would be a good match for a first-time CEO, the board decided to appoint Poff as interim CFO. Poff explains, "It was as if I were interviewing for the CFO position every day. But I ultimately did get the nod." Today Poff recalls his interim days at designer brands as a period of accelerated learning. You'll hear that story and much more on episode number 871, featuring CFO Jared Poff of Designer Brands. Remember, the future of finance is listening.
We're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round, where I'll ask you several quick questions intended to inform and inspire future finance leaders. We want you to look back again for us. And Don, we're wondering about your first 60 days, the first time you stepped into a CFO role, that first quarter, that first 60 days, even the first 30 days. If you could go back in time and just give yourself a piece of advice to that person who you once were, what would it have been just as you're starting out as a CFO? What is the piece of advice you'd give that person?
Yeah, I'd say take a deep breath, relax. Things that you don't know, you'll figure out. Don't try and do it all at once. Tackle the major items and move on from there. And I keep on saying that the whole time as you go on, as you do new things and you go on and like when we first tried to do a public offering for an MLP in 2015, and I was having a phone conversation with the SEC, I go, oh my God, what's this gonna be like? And then as we had debt and I had to be publicly rated, talk to Moody's and S&P, all this stuff, just take a breath. They're all people. They're nice people. They're smart people. And you're going to have stuff come in and it's don't panic. I mean, you can't get to everything at once and you can't learn everything at once. You just have to take a breath and sort of say, I got this. We'll work through it and we'll get it. I think that would be the biggest piece of advice I'd give anybody.
I always like to ask our guests to reflect a little bit on the personal side of things for us. We wonder if you're known for a personal habit or part of a daily routine, something that you do. It might be something that a family member would point out, and it's something you've done over time. Maybe it keeps you on an even keel. I don't know. But anything come to mind when we ask for a personal habit, routine, something you're known for?
Absolutely. And I think if you ask any of my family members, they'd say the same response. And you can see in the background of my office and you see what's on the wall. I'm a Duke grad, and I'm a huge sports fan, not just of basketball, but also of football too. So, I mean, I have season football tickets. I just came back from a Duke Wake Forest game. I've been to 2 Final Fours. Coach K was hired my senior year, and we said, who? I mean, my family knows that they're first, basketball second, but not by much. Okay, so that's where I get my relief, and I've often joked with my wife that. A year or so when I retire, I'm going to get a blue RV that has horn that has the sound will be devil with a blue dress on. So I'm just a huge and love to work with the university and have for many years. But if they didn't come up with that with the first response, then I'd be surprised. But it gives me great joy and pleasure, and still does to this day.
But is there a book or something you'd like to recommend, a resource to our listeners? Doesn't have to be a business book. Maybe it's something you escape with, but.
Well, I would recommend a business book, and it was recommended to me. And it's Good to Great by Jim Collins. And one of the companies in there is Circuit City, and of course they went bankrupt. And they said, "Well, what's good to great?" But it really, it was recommended to me by a CEO I work with, and it really hit home with me. And it hit home with me about getting the right people on board and making sure they're in the right place, and making sure, they talk about the hedge, I think it's the hedgehog in Good to Great, focusing on it very hard. Don't try and be all things to everybody. I have an expression I use. I don't know if this may be for some of your listeners, this may be old, but in Kentucky Fried Chicken, they used to have commercials that say, we do one thing and we do it right. They sell chicken. That used to be their logo. So I kid with people and I say, when times get tough, start frying that chicken, because do the one thing and do it right. But I think they did a really good job in there. The other thing they did is they talked about leadership. And I consider myself a servant leader. And that's really important. I mean, I'm here for my people. you can't have ego, because if you have ego, you're gonna lose. And the book really points that out. And I felt that way, but it really one of the things that helped me is you have to leave an organization and walk away, and it can function without you. And I think that's something that some people sometimes learn and go, well, if I don't do it, I'm not going to get credit for it. What I want to do is I want to be excited telling people, let me tell you what my staff did. And that's where you really get to the point where, I think you've achieved what you want to achieve. If you start bragging about your staff, I think you're in the right place.
Well, we're up to our final question, where we're going to ask you to look forward finally 12 months and share with us your priorities as a finance leader. What would those be?
Well, my priorities obviously are making sure that my biggest priority is obviously we have 2 more acquisitions announced, and we're going to do those. But my biggest priority is really focusing on how to make life easier for everybody. Let's look at the things that are causing people problems. Let's take the waste out. Because I really believe in a good work-life balance. That's very, very important to me. I don't want people having to work. Obviously, if you're an accountant, end of the year, quarters, that's just part of what you sign up for. But I want to make processes a lot more efficient, and I want to make sure that when I leave this place, that I felt like I've done everything I can to, from all perspectives, make it just not efficient, but also productive. And that's really, really my highest priority.
Don Bassell, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.